folks? Welcome to the channel. I'm Nate Stewart. I'm a loan officer here in Puerto Rico. And on the show today, I'm actually in a visiting studio. I got invited by the great Robbie Krager, the flip-flop flipper, to come and have a conversation. And so what you're going to hear is a whole bunch of different stuff, all about real estate in Puerto Rico. Some of it from the box of conventional loans, and a lot of it from outside the box of conventional loans, but all about how to get deals done here on the island. So a lot of people would not know this, and I am probably not even supposed to say it, but with your permission, I actually had the great Robbie Krager apply for a mortgage with me. I don't have to talk about the details, but I remember when you came and were interested, we were talking about the kinds of conventional conforming loans and all those kinds of things. I think it wasn't a good fit at that moment, but for you, when you're considering, now that you've had so much experience, you have so many different investment properties running, how do you consider where do you want the money to come from for X purchase? If you're thinking about a deal, is it, because I imagine that there's a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah.
And so how do you figure, okay, I want to take equity from here or this account or that? How do you kind of drill down and identify?
So when we were applying for the loan, it was for one of the many houses we've looked at that we would have lived in, right? So it would have been for our personal home. That's not the only situation where we would go to the bank, but I will tell you that we don't borrow a lot of money. So how do we figure out where we're going to get the money? We partner with a lot of people who have money, or we just have our own money by selling assets back in the States and then bringing the money to the island of Puerto Rico. That's what we've done for 7 years. Now we've got a bunch of cash flowing assets that we would love to borrow against, but the loan programs aren't available yet.
Right.
And so for me, it's a constant sort of battle as to where do you get the best bang for your buck. For many years, I was debt averse because debt just crushed me when the market crashed back in 2008. For most people, it had crashed a year and a half before that for me. And we were a debt-driven business, so I had many millions of dollars worth of loans borrowed. And it was as if somebody turned off the water faucet, said, you can't drink for 2 years. And so we went a decade where we didn't even have a credit card.
Whoa.
So when I came to the island of Puerto Rico, it was sort of towards the end of that. In fact, I didn't get my first credit card until probably during COVID, maybe right before COVID.
Wow.
But from 2008 to 2018, 2019, no debt at all. Wow. Just cash, just partnerships with people who had cash.
But getting it done. But you were finding ways to get it done.
Yeah, we've never failed when we've said we're going to purchase something. And I've consistently over 25, 26 years been buying things at the place where you have to have the cash the fastest at the foreclosure sale, where I can remember many, many times where I would buy multiple properties at a foreclosure sale that I have to pay for all of this stuff by the next morning in Florida. And I would be handing over 5%, thinking to myself, where the hell am I going to get this money, right?
No way.
So we had a group of investors that we would go to, but I would be dialing for dollars and have literally 24 hours to get the job done.
Because what happens if you give that 5% and then you don't come up with the 95?
You lose it. It's gone. There's no take backs, no give backs. So I was buying great deals, and I had a really good set of backers, but there were many times where we're I literally tell people all the time, the cash is not the most important part of the deal as a real estate investor, that it's actually having a great deal. And I have tested that theory again and again and again. And so I stand by that.
Okay.
And when I meet people who want to overvalue their cash, I tend to not do deals with them, because I really do, even when it's my cash, I believe that a Don finding the next greatest best deal and his ability to put it together and get it renovated and all of that, that's the more important part of the deal than my money. Now, I want my money to make a return, and I want it to be safe, and I want to get it back, but I don't want to be one of those guys where I'm just putting my thumb on, I'm going to pick on a Don a little bit, trying to make it so that a Don can't make any money until I've made money. We've done this partnership for years and years now with cash, where it's truly, if we make $1, each side gets half. If we lose $1, I expect that my side loses with the person who put up the money, or if I'm the one putting up the money, I expect the guy who's doing the deal, that if we lose $1, we each lose half, right?
Fair enough.
That's been how we've done it, and as long as you're getting good deals, and I do think it becomes a little bit easier over time, right? Like, so the first time I did it, way more stressful, way more difficult than after doing it 1,500 times, right?
Another thing I want to ask you is, like, how deep have you gotten into, like, I don't know if foreclosures or just like the properties that are, not probate, at auction? At the subasta. Yo tenía I had the word in Spanish, but
at the
subasta. Have you gotten into the subasta scene here, and what is that? What is that like?
Yeah. So, that's what I did for 20 years prior to coming to Puerto Rico.
Oh, okay.
Right. We bought thousands of properties. We were part of the good old boy network when it comes to the foreclosure sale at the courthouse steps. And any town USA, if you guys ever show up to the courthouse steps, there's a group of guys that are regulars there. That they are. In the South, we call them the good old boys, right? And I was a part of the good old boys for a long, long, long time.
Okay.
And so when I came to the island of Puerto Rico, I knew and had in my back pocket always that I could go to the foreclosure sale. Now it's very challenging for me to go to the foreclosure sale. Even today, my Spanish is not that great, and everything's done in Spanish. But I can take a Don with me, and I pretty much at this point, I certainly understand the numbers, and I can understand most of the conversations that people are having, even if I am not able to answer back in Spanish as well. But we've been to the foreclosure sale here on the island. We've been successful at it. We got a great property, a 4-family house in Carolina that we bought for $145,000.
Whoa.
The interesting thing.
Is it distressed when you get these places?
A little bit distressed. The house is in really good shape, but we fixed it up now to put it on Airbnb. And so we bought it for $145. We've put about $100,000 in it, and we're going to throw it on Airbnb. It's appraised right now. We got a low ball appraisal. That's still slightly more than we got in it, right? Like $275, I think the appraisal came in, and we think it should be worth $350 or so.
Okay.
So we're fighting that appraisal. So the idea on it is we bought it for cash and at the foreclosure sale here on the island. Cash means all of the cash at the time that they say third time sold and the gavel drops, you hand them a check immediately.
Whoa.
For
so
the
it's not like a deposit.
Amount. Yeah.
The whole amount.
The whole amount, right? So you go into the foreclosure room and there's probably hundreds of thousands, and if there's multiple bidders, hundreds of thousands of dollars there, if not millions of dollars sitting in that room. And that's an interesting, that's interesting, right? And back home where it's 5% and another, maybe it's 5 o'clock that afternoon you have to pay or the next day. So as difficult as that is, it's much more difficult here on the island of Puerto Rico. So
interesting.
There's a fewer amount of people that are actually able to do that. And I really like that. So I've always sort of thought that I want to have the highest barrier of entry, make it the most difficult place that you can buy. That's where I'll thrive. And so I love the idea that now we're going to push our way in possibly, and we may get rejected at first, but eventually if we go often enough, we'll become a part of those core people that are buying there.
Los viejitos, the old boys club of here. There you go.
That's right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Airbnb. Like I get a lot of my clients come into the island that they're interested in the Airbnb dream. They want to have that. Is there any is the market saturated already for Airbnb? Is there still a way that people could come to the island as popular as it's been, as many great listings as there are out there now? Is it completely saturated, or is it still possible for somebody to come, find a good deal, and be profitable on Airbnb?
Okay, so yes, it's possible, for sure. I think that the one-off condominiums on the beach that you're spending $500,000 and up on, that is fairly saturated. Okay. So still, can you get a deal in an area? Yeah, probably. But if you can get away from the obvious stuff, and for instance, Santurce is one that we like to invest in, and find properties that fit the need of a place where people want to come, and tourists want to come, so that you can make it an Airbnb and you can still buy it low enough. I tell people on my channel, buy it based on what the long-term rents are going to be, and then if you can renovate it to a level that you can rent it out on Airbnb, that's great. So we advise against buying it based on what the Airbnb is going to be, because that could go away. And I do think that there's some saturation levels on these one-off properties. The other area where I think people who have that Airbnb dream is to go bigger. And so go up to a 7-unit property and then call it a guest house and set up and jump through all of the hoops and get yourself an Act 60 tourism tax degree and get 40% tax credits back. And I think that there's still, I mean, tons and tons of room and growth in that area. So that's traditional, like hotel style investing. And the island of Puerto Rico wants to take the GDP from tourism from 6.5% that it is currently. Maybe it's up a little bit, all the way up to about 18 to 20%. So tons of growth that will happen inside of that. But I think for now, those, you know, if you're trying to buy a $500,000 condo and make it cash flow in a 1-bedroom apartment on the beach in Isla Verde, that's a hard road. That's a hard road to hoe.
For sure.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I guess if you're able to borrow money on it, you can make it easier for them. But if that's my cash, there's no chance I'd do that.
I mean,
investment.
that's going to be a small return there considering the amount going in. We call it the white whale scenario, and anytime any of our loan officers or anybody gets a phone call, when somebody's asking for the white whale, a message goes into the group to be like, oh, another person looking for the white whale, which is 150. We get so many people calling to say, I want a $150,000 condo beachfront in Puerto Rico. I want to walk into the sand for $150,000.
I want it too.
It's like, yeah, find one and then call me. I want 10.
Listen, I want it too.
Yeah.
and I promise you that I look at more real estate than just about anybody that anybody's watching this knows. Like, this is what I do day in and day out. Is I look
Living
for
and breathing,
I look for a $150,000 condo on the beach.
And if you
that I
find
can
one,
walk
you're
into
probably
the
not going to
sand.
call me.
If I find it, we're ready to run to the bank, right?
sure.
Like, so we're not asking you for a loan.
Right.
If somebody wants to sell one, you can have the money tomorrow, right? Like, find me an Isla Verde condo for $150,000. It's a no-brainer. I'm going to show up with the check tomorrow.
Oh, I got
because
it.
they don't exist, right? Like,
Right.
they're
No,
just,
it's the white whale. Like,
it's
you're
the
just
white
not
whale.
seeing this thing.
Yeah. They did
speaking
exist
of,
when I came 7 years ago, six and a half
wow.
years ago. They were
I
there.
mean,
I wish I'd bought more.
Right, for sure. I mean, I feel like there's parts of the island that are just like I get so many calls about the same places.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe if they were willing to go to the South Coast,
Yeah.
maybe you might find some better
I think
deals
you're
down
absolutely
there.
right. If
Yeah.
you can get
South
outside
Coast
of the
is-
metro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Outside of the metro, outside of Luquillo, outside of Fajardo, outside of Rincon, Mayagüez. Well, Mayagüez is like
Mayagüez is
Cabo
still
Rojo,
good.
super popular. Like, those are the hot spots. They're beautiful places,
Yeah.
but the island is so insanely beautiful everywhere, and there's still a cool vibe in many other places. Like, I kind of wish people
Absolutely.
would like branch out more.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I was just in Yabucoa over the weekend. We had Sunday brunch on the water, and my friend is a local, and she took us to 2 houses she has. One of them's up on the hill with an amazing view. She bought it for $95,000. The other one is, or maybe I'm getting
When
it
did you buy
mixed
it,
up. Like recently, this year, like this year or last year, right? Like, so just now. And the other one was a small house on the beach, like a road in front of it, but you walk across, like you said, over to the sand. And it was $70,000 for one, maybe that was the one on the hill, and $95,000 for the other. But again, these are deals where you should run to the bank when you get them. Like, you don't have to overthink things. And I tell people on my audience, like, if you find what we call the deal of a lifetime, don't fight yourself into thinking that you've got to get a better deal, because if someone's asking $95,000 and you've got to beat them down, that's a mistake. So when you see it, you'll know you're seeing it, and just it's okay to say yes to a great deal.
yeah, that makes sense. Well, speaking, because you would see far more cash deals than I ever do, because every deal that we do is financing by nature.
Yeah.
How fast does cash close?
On the island?
Yeah.
Not nearly as fast as it does.
Everybody
in the
tells me, like,
States.
we've got it, because like that's like the go-to thing to tell the loan officer when we're not going fast enough for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We've got a cash buyer. We can close this next week. Like,
Yeah.
that is like the go-to little move that they like to play with me. But how quick, in your experience, I mean, what's the average? I know that it's a lot of
So
different
everything's
scenarios, a lot
longer
of
in Puerto
different
Rico.
Okay.
And I'll answer it states and then Puerto Rico. I think a cash offer can close in a few days in the States. Can. Not normal, but can.
things. Okay.
I'd be surprised if a cash deal could close in a couple of weeks in Puerto Rico. It just takes longer to set things up, right?
Okay.
Like, so really fast would be 15 days would be like phenomenally fast. Probably it's closer to 30 days.
Okay.
And I think that's just because of the way everything is done here. You've got to find a time where the seller and the buyer all get together in one place at one time on the island of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Whereas back home, we can do things via DocuSign, or certainly we can have the seller show up on Friday afternoon at 5 and the buyer shows up Saturday morning at 10 a.m. That's much harder to do here on the island of Puerto Rico. So everything's slower in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I am consistently reminding folks though that call us for help is that like our whole that is true. Like we see that certain things definitely take longer here, and I'm not going to hide that. But like we don't, at least in our practice, we don't start from an assumption of the island time effect, because if you start there, then now it's like slow motion. And so like we are of the mindset, and thankfully the other groups and companies and stuff that we work with, because now we've been going enough time that we've got really good relationships with like title companies and insurance companies and all these different entities that you need when you're using financing to buy a property. But it's like we're just, if you start with the island time effect as an excuse, it's going to go slow. And so that is bullshit for us. It's like, no, like,
good.
We're trying to move this thing and close it as fast as we possibly can, always, you know? And so I'm going to remember that it takes closer to next time somebody gives me that, excuse of like, you're taking too long. We've got a cash buyer here ready to close next week. It's like, well, what, did you guys already do the contract?
Do you have the title
We're
work
in the
set
option
up?
period. You already did all this stuff.
You have a contract in place. You have the title work. Do they have their funds wired into the island? I mean,
that's a big question.
It's a real thing that sometimes wires can take longer to come from the States than they would in the States. State to state, it's almost instant.
Yeah.
I had a family member wire me $70,000 a couple of weeks ago, and he was getting it out of an investment account, and I think it took like 7 or 8 days for and some of that is his investment account. They're trying to hold on to that money and collect interest, but still,
that was a U.S. account to a U.S. account.
That's right. I mean,
it happens. It does happen.
They don't necessarily, when you're.
We had a lender's wire.
When you're going to Chase and you're saying, "Hey, I want you to wire it to Banco Popular," they're like, "Oh, that's an international wire."
Right. That's going to take a while. We've had a lender's wire get stuck and like go missing. That was wild, because it's like they're a wholesale mortgage lender. We're talking about billions of dollars that they've got like in capital that they're wiring out, and that their wire, I guess it was because of, well, we ended up finding out later, it took like 4 days to find it before it got put back and they had to set it again. But it was like somebody's name in the transaction pinged some database, and they saw that going, and they just, I guess they grab like 1 out of 1,000 of these wires that meets X criteria, whatever. And that was a big problem, because that happened to be a closing where we had asked the title company and the attorney for the lender to drive to Rincon to do the closing and do all the documentation. They drove their butts all the way over there, and no money showed up.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like, they popped the bottle of champagne anyway and drank it, and they're like, well, we'll close next week, I guess.
It's going to happen, right?
They figured it out. And that's the other thing too, is that like, one thing that I've noticed about Puerto Rico deals versus other parts of the U.S. is that people here tend to be a lot more like durable or tough and gritty to like, let's get through this, let's get it done. Like sellers and buyers, like people, especially if you've already been in the process, if you've already done the appraisal or title work, or gone through these steps and it's been some time, probably now you have some rapport with the people, maybe hopefully that you haven't burnt the relationship with the seller, but like people are going to work their tails off to get things done. And that actually brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. In your experience doing so many deals here in Puerto Rico, and with your experience having, done so many deals outside of Puerto Rico, how often would you say you come across someone here who's acting in bad faith? That they're just like hiding something about the property, or they're trying to get over on you? Like, how common would you say it is to find somebody here that's acting in bad faith?
I don't think that I have really, right? Like, I don't think that's a common problem. Yeah. There is something called Gringo pricing. Like, I think that's real, but I don't think that's bad faith. That's just probably like good business. You see someone who's willing to pay more than your neighbor is, and you are going to charge them more. I don't like it at all, but I don't think there's a lot of fraud on the island. No. And I do think, going back to what you were saying in the wire being lost and that kind of thing, that sort of thing happens on the island, and people do have a way of just like, oh, it's okay. And really quickly, I laughed when you said it, is because we recently made a $90,000 deposit into our business account. And when Carol got back and she looked at the thing, the ticket said $9,000. So we went back the next day and said, hey, this was actually 90 grand. And they're like, oh, it's no problem. They'll catch it in this other department, and it's all going to be fine. And it's all fine.
Okay,
I
cool.
mean, you know.
Cool.
I
They
think
found the other 90%.
Like that was Saturday we did it, and
Okay.
yesterday we were told that. So I assume, since nobody has panicked that we're missing 90 grand, that it must have come through.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I asked the question because I get that question very often. Is like, people, they'll call and they want to come down here and buy, but they're really scared. They think that everybody's out to get them and everyone's going to try to charge them, or just like rip them off. And
did you have that experience when you came? Like, your friends were like, oh, it's dangerous and all. I can remember people telling me that, and it's been completely the opposite. Like, I've had nothing but good experience on the island, so I don't think at all that that's a major concern, or
no. Me neither.
Or a concern at all. Like, I mean, and we've done hundreds of transactions, like, you know,
Cool.
a real fair test model.
Yeah,
test
for
case,
sure.
right?
No,
like,
that's exactly.
If it was real,
then you'd
somebody
be
would have
seeing
done
it.
something to us
for
by
sure.
now, right?
And like, same.
Now I just invited it. So knock on wood. Hope to God that doesn't happen.
Right. No, but I would say the same. Like, I've done, not my personal deals, but helping, facilitating other deals, that it's very, very rare. And I can maybe think of 3 individuals that I was like, I don't think these people are being ethical. But they weren't like the buyers or the sellers. It was like an attorney or like some agent that like just was being discriminatory or things like that. Like, that's what I've seen more. But as far as the safety is concerned, like, no, I feel very safe on this island. Like, it's like anywhere. Like, if your favorite hobby is to go drink and walk home alone at night, you're gonna find problems. And here is like anywhere. There's areas that, are safer than others, and like, you just, when you're walking around, you walk with your head up. But this is what you do anywhere. Like, I don't go to Disney World. Like, I think we're actually from similar. I'm from like Melbourne, Florida, like down the road. From like
from Orlando.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like, I don't feel
neighbors.
comfortable. Yeah. But I don't feel comfortable in Disney World. Like, there's so many people that I don't know. Like, that's an environment where me personally, like, I'm
certain there's someone at Disney
my,
World ready to pick your pocket or pick up your computer if you put it down or look away.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but like, I feel safer here than lots of other places that I've ever lived in.
I think you're exactly right. If you're not going into the places where, anytime you hear about something bad happening, they were always doing something stupid.
Yeah. With very few exceptions, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, shit happens. Like, there's really unfortunate things that can happen, but in the general case, no. It's like super safe. And most people, thankfully, in the real estate industry here, acting in good faith, wanting to get the deals done. And thankfully, that is one of the, I think, of the Puerto Rican culture of like that resiliency and like pushing through things. Maybe it'll be at a different pace, but folks, if they want to get it done, we're going to get it done.
And we've had experiences where we had a offer accepted and we're selling something and they're getting a loan from you, let's say, and 45 days has gone by and there's a problem, and then another 45 days goes by, and then the realtor and the broker, the loan broker, is saying it's going to happen. And so we've waited, and lo and behold, it has happened. Where in the States, once we started to see those problems, we would probably back out of that deal. But because of the way the island works, we've been more patient with it, and it's paid off for us. So cool. I think that's not that we would want that to happen every time, but because of what you said, the resiliency, I think it's more realistic to expect things to happen. Maybe it just takes a little bit longer.
I'd agree. Yeah, I think it can. I mean, it can happen really fast as well. Like, I've seen it happen. Like, we had a VA loan where we got cleared to close in 17 business days.
That's quick
here,
in Florida. I mean,
right. Yeah. Anywhere. And that can happen. It kind of is like when you go in, when you sign a contract and you go into a deal, it's like kind of asking the universe to deal you a hand of cards. It's like you're going to get a card for the personality of the seller. You're going to get a card for how motivated they are and for all these little quirks about all of the different, and because it's like, not like, you can't just like buy a place on Amazon yet. You got to talk to sellers and you got to use a lender maybe or go talk to your banker. It's like you're going to have to talk to a whole bunch of different people, and a lot of different entities are going to have to coordinate to get it done. And so like here, what I usually tell people, like the most stressful part of the process is like right at the end. Like, people, if they're wanting to fly to the island or whatever, it's like we have to thread the needle. We have to fit these pieces together between title and appraisal and insurance and lender and all. Everybody has to fit together perfectly for it to close. And if it doesn't, if there's one little number that we have a doubt about, we got to wait. And so it's like,
all up.
Yeah.
We've been at a lot of closing tables where there's a whole bunch of people in the room because everybody's got to show up at the same time, and you're missing one person, and we're waiting for them to get there.
Yes.
It's an interesting dynamic because we don't have that in the States.
No, that is a unique thing, that it's like a wet sign territory and a community property territory. So it's like, if you're legally married, I had a guy get stuck because he started the divorce proceedings with his former spouse in New Jersey like 25 years ago. And then they separated and didn't really think much of it after that. Well, he got in process again down here. And wouldn't you know, his name popped up in the registry as still being married.
Oh, no.
And it was like, okay, well, now we can close if you call your former spouse and have her come down and sign the paperwork with you, or have her come down and do a postnuptial agreement. Then we can do. But it was like,
I haven't talked to her in 15 years.
Yeah, it was like that. It was like, I haven't even thought about her in a decade. And I was like, yeah, well, now you got to give her a call if you want to close.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there are some definitely nuanced, different things about it here. But I mean, Puerto Rico, so I love it.
I hope
here.
he ended things at least reasonably well and had a chance at that, right?
I don't know how that one ended up. I know we didn't close it. He wasn't able to.
Oh, he wasn't able to pull that off.
He wasn't able to get her to come down to Puerto Rico.
I was mad at you 25 years ago. You think I'm flying to Puerto Rico to help you now? Hell no.
25 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it was like that. It didn't end up. And actually, one of the bad faith actors was the agent, the listing agent for that deal, who he had put all kinds of crazy stuff in the country, because that's the other thing, that there's no standard contract template here.
Yeah.
Not like Florida, where it's essentially fill in the blank.
It is.
Every single one
is
is
called the FAR bar, and they're the same
yes,
every
exactly
single time,
right.
pretty much.
Here, I've seen a 30-pager contract drawn up by an attorney that forgot the address. And so I was like, okay, well, we can't use that. Thank you. I mean, they had to fix it, but versus like a 1-pager where people hand wrote stuff on the back that worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I like about Puerto Rico is that they look to the contractor. They look to the agreement.
Oh, yes.
That's what the rulings are going to go with. And so that's a nice, easy, logical way that you can expect things to go. So there's not a bunch of special carve-outs for tenant rights or anything. You got a lease. What's the lease say? You got a sales contract. What's the sales contract say? That's different in a worse way, I think, in many parts of the U.S.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
But, man, I really appreciate you bringing me here and having me on your show. And, I also appreciate – I just want to thank you for, putting information out there for folks of how to come down and enjoy Puerto Rico, regardless of where you're from. It's a beautiful place. There's so much that it can offer. It is on the upswing, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I think that we just need more good information and more people, doing value-add investing, bringing resources, building things up, sharing it with people. That's what it's about.
Well, I think we share that in our heart, right? So we're both kind of cheerleading Puerto Rico out there through YouTube and any other means that I can. And so I appreciate all that I've seen you do for the island. And I love what we did here today for my show, for your show. So let's do it again.
Absolutely, man.
All right, buddy.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.